Facts.
Well, it's Tuesday. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. My name's Dan Alstrand, and again, I'm filling in for Todd this week. I hope you all had a happy Thanksgiving long weekends. Walking around the neighborhood on Sunday, the whole place smelled like turkey. So I guess they weren't listening to the great Thanksgiving debate we had on Friday, where ham was a close second, but turkey eventually did win, and it certainly was smelling an awful lot like the bird in the neighborhood this week, walking through my apartment building on Sunday, and it was, I'm hungry, right? Anyway, and I'll bet many of your workplaces are going to smell like Thanksgiving dinner leftovers today, and for most, for the rest of the week, right? What a difference a week makes, doesn't it? This time last week, we were wondering what outgoing HRM Mayor Mike Savage was going to do once he hands over the chain of office to the municipality's next mayor. Now we know. Prime Minister on the weekend appointing Savage to be the next Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia. Thanksgiving gift, maybe an early Christmas present. Anyone else wondering about the timing of the whole thing? An announcement from the PMO, that's the Prime Minister's office, on a long weekend? When everybody's busy with family and friends? I have no doubt that Mike Savage is going to make an excellent Lieutenant Governor, but he hasn't even left the mayor's office yet. Optics aren't good, are they? I'm interested in what you have to say about this appointment during our open hour. That comes at 11 o'clock today. Also, Nova Scotia government employees are back at the office full-time. The province announcing that move back in August. Today's the day. And if the drive-in was any indication, the government says it's aimed at ensuring policy and programs function and not necessarily the roads into HRM this morning. My goodness, traffic accidents and backed up. I know it's Tuesday, and Tuesdays are usually busy. But I don't know if this means, I think there's 3,500 non-union employees that are impacted by this. And I don't know if that means that the Mondays and Friday light, as we've come to call it around here, are a thing of the past, perhaps. Another question I'd like to throw out to you for the open hour today, is the work from home model dead? A good question for the open hour today. Relations between Canada and India at a low point. The countries expelling each other's diplomats over heightened concerns about a rash of violent crimes, rather. The RCMP links the Indian government agents. The Ottawa has accused India's top diplomat in Canada and 5 others of involvement in criminality and expelled them all yesterday. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly said violence linked to the Indian government has only increased since Canada made its concerns about murder, extortion, and coercion public last year. Prime Minister said New Delhi tried to undermine Canadian institutions instead of helping to resolve these criminal cases. If you were listening to the show on Friday, you heard Tim Powers and I talking about that, and I had wondered what that conversation on the sidelines of, I think it was the Francophone Summit that the Prime Minister was at last week, where he had a conversation with the head of heads of the Indian government, and I'm wondering if maybe that was more heated than we thought it was. Thanks to Vanessa Vandenez on the other side of the glass for everything she does, keeping this show moving forward. Dr. Rob is in for Science Files in Hour 3 today. He, like many of you, still buzzing about the Northern Lights show last week, will explore the science of Aurora Borealis. And he'll be here to answer all of your science questions. That is hour number 3 today. I mentioned Thanksgiving off the top today. Many of us enjoying a big dinner over the weekend, but there are many in our province that are struggling just to put enough food on the table to get by. With the change of the seasons, it's vitally important that we remember those that are less fortunate than ourselves. Please welcome to the show Feed Nova Scotia's new executive director, Ash Avery. Ash, welcome.
Hi, welcome.
Hi,
Dan. How are you?
I'm well. I don't think we've been introduced yet.
We have not.
You've got some big shoes to fill over there.
I do, absolutely. And it's been fantastic. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come on today and share more about the work that we're doing.
This is a busy time of the year. Obviously, Thanksgiving now in the rear view, but Christmas is right around the corner, and the change of seasons to that the W word that we don't like to talk about, and that's winter. How busy is it right now at Feed Nova Scotia?
So it's busier than ever. We've had 23,000 unique individuals accessing food banks across Nova Scotia per month. So we're seeing more frequent visits to food banks than previous years. We're seeing higher trends of usage of food banks than prior years. And broadly speaking, we're seeing national trends across Canada of more folks who are food insecure and more people who are accessing food banks.
That number continues to rise month over month, does it not?
Absolutely.
Now, Feed Nova Scotia is an organization that it's not a food bank. You help to support food banks, correct?
Exactly. So we provide food and funds to 140 food banks, meal programs, and shelters across the province. And we are also partnering with communities to develop new and innovative approaches to addressing food insecurity. So we recognize that even though thousands of Nova Scotians are accessing food banks, that the need is even greater than that. And there are many who are not accessing those services.
The last data I saw was a couple years old from 2022, said that 22% of Nova Scotians are food insecure. That's a large number.
Yes, it is. And Nova Scotia has the highest rates of food insecurity and poverty out of any province in Canada, which means 40% of children are living in a household that is food insecure. And we know that that is even more so for racialized communities, for single-parent homes who are disproportionately impacted in Nova Scotia.
Ash, I mentioned that we're into the fall now and into the winter time, and that tends to put a bit of a spotlight on people who are food insecure and are less fortunate than we are as we get closer to the Christmas season. Is there a busier time of the year? Is this the busiest time of the year, or is it busy all year?
Certainly it's busy all year, and as I said before, we're seeing the demand increase month over month, but certainly during the holiday seasons, the demand for support increases, and so we see more people accessing food banks, we see the need deepen, and we see a higher demand for services.
Maybe a definition of what food insecure is, Ash. What does that mean?
Yeah, great question. So food insecure means that folks are missing meals, they're reducing their intake of food, or they're going days without food.
And that's almost a quarter of the population.
Exactly.
Wow. So, Ash, obviously, Feed Nova Scotia relies on volunteers and donations in order to survive.
Yes, we do.
How does somebody do that? Can we do that at an individual level? Is it a corporate level? Is it a combination of both? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's lots of ways that folks in the community can help. So we can always use funds. These always go further. It allows us to buy in bulk. So for every $2 donation, it means that we're able to distribute enough food to provide 3 meals. And of course, when you're supporting us, you're supporting the 140 charities and non-for-profits that we work with. We always accept food donations, which can be dropped off at our warehouse in HRM, or if you visit our website, you can find a food drop-off location that is in your community. And we also have our Stuff a Bus campaign coming up. So if folks want to do a food drive within their workplace or community, they can sign up and the bus will come around and collect the food donation. So you can sign up for that on our website. We have a 50-50 running right now. The jackpot is over $14,000. That ends tomorrow, so you can check that out on our website or through Rafflebox. And we're always looking for volunteers. So volunteers are critical to our mission. There is an abundance of opportunities and ways to get involved with the organization through volunteering.
Ash, I've had the opportunity to visit your facility out there in Burnside, but many haven't. Tell me how it works once you collect the food. How does it get distributed?
Yeah, so we have 5 trucks that distribute the food across the province. Everything that comes in through our warehouse is sorted by volunteers and staff, organized, and then loaded onto the trucks and distributed across the province.
Are we expecting a big need as we hit the winter season?
Absolutely. Yes, we are. So I can say that as the demand increases, we are seeing a reduction in food donations. So the need is even more so.
So we're seeing the level of donations drop?
Yes.
Any indication why? Is it because more people are becoming food insecure and don't have any extra to donate?
Yeah, that could definitely be a factor for sure.
Okay, Ash, again, if somebody wants to help, if somebody wants to help you out and donate or spend some time working with you folks, how do they do that? What's the best place to learn all of that info?
So definitely check out our website at feednovascotia.ca. We are on social media through Facebook and Instagram, or you can give our office a call. And if you are someone who is looking for food support, we encourage you to contact 211.
Ash, I appreciate the time and look forward to chatting in the future.
Great to meet you. Thank you.
That is Ash Avery, the new executive director at Feed Nova Scotia. Interesting that at the giving time of the year, which we often talk about, it's Christmas and people tend to be a little more generous at that time of the year because, we're in the giving mood. The numbers are starting to drop. So I think that that's telling, and I think that there are a number of ways that you can help. And I know that there's a lot of demand out there for money for charities and those kind of things, but it doesn't take very long for us to take a look around to see what food insecurity looks like in our city. It's at 22%, and that number is on the rise. So 1 out of every 4 people. Isn't that crazy? 1/4 of the population is food insecure in Nova Scotia, and that is that's just a number that we have to fix. Going to stop down and take our first break here on the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Veinotte Show. Dan Alstrand along with you here on a Tuesday morning. A little bit of inside information when you're sitting in this chair and it's a long weekend, you're thinking, oh boy, I got to get some content for Tuesday because, we want to enjoy a long weekend as well. And you think, well, Lori Turnbull, let's talk about, something might happen in politics in the next 4 days. Nothing's happening, is it, Lori?
Never. Always so quiet these days.
Right? I guess we have to start with the tete-a-tete that's happening in Ottawa between our federal government and the government of India. Your thoughts on this expulsion and this escalation?
Yeah, it is an escalation. I think it's one of those things that's shocking for people to hear, right? Like, this is a country that we have a big trade relationship with, and that seems to be that's ongoing, right? And trade has actually increased with India over the past couple of years, but there has been this tension around, India saying that Canada has become a safe haven for Sikh separatists, and we're saying that the people who represent the Indian government, their proxies are involved in crimes in Canada. And so it's serious stuff. And I mean, a year ago, the Prime Minister said in the House of Commons when it opened that his suspicion, he had reason to think, I'm paraphrasing here, that the Indian government had something to do with a killing that was in Canada. And so it's just it's serious stuff. So see where it goes from here.
Now, for those of us that are on the sidelines watching this, Lori, what does it mean when we expel diplomats? Is that sort of is that the first level of censure, or how does that work?
Well, I mean, at this point, it's an indication that things, in terms of the relationships between the two countries, are not going well at all. Obviously, trust has broken down, communication has broken down, and again, those trade relationships continue, but Canada and India are not seeing eye to eye here. And so what happens now in terms of what accountability there's going to be, we're expelling people, they expelled people in kind. So right now it seems to be a kind of doesn't seem to be any positive way forward in terms of communication, at least to the public eye. But then there's going to be things going on the back channels. There's going to be, other allied countries getting involved to see what can be done about it.
Are we in danger of damaging that, or I shouldn't say we, is there danger that the trade relationship that Canada and India share is in jeopardy? Could one or the other just say, no, we're done?
I mean, sure, one or the other could always say that, but it doesn't seem like that is the direction this is heading right now. And Mary Ng, our trade minister, has said this is not something that she sees happening, and there's value, a lot of value in that relationship, and Canada wants that relationship to continue. And so at this point, it seems like they're trying to draw some distance between the obvious challenges that we're having in the relationship on the diplomatic side and on the interference side, but at the same time, keep the trade relationship going.
I joked on Friday that there was a meeting between Canada, the Prime Minister, and the Indian government at the Francophone Summit last week, and I said, I'd love to have been a fly on the wall in that room. Maybe it was worse than I thought.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, we've seen over the past couple of years that relationships, at times where Prime Minister Trudeau had opportunity and had cause to meet Modi, it's been very chilly. And I think initially we didn't know why that was, and at all, right? Like, the public didn't know what was going on. And so it looked strange to us. It looked like, why is Trudeau clearly having this frosty interaction with Modi? What did Canada do wrong? So over the last year or so, we've gotten more information to understand why it has seemed so tense between the two countries. And so, now we will see. We will see what happens at this point.
So, Laurie, on Sunday. I'm in my kitchen and I'm getting my dinner ready for Thanksgiving. And I look down at my phone and I see a release from the Prime Minister's office, and he appointed Halifax Mayor Mike Savage as the Lieutenant Governor on a Sunday on a long weekend. Am I reading too much into this?
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, interesting timing, right? Because the mayor's election is right around the corner. And so as Savage's municipal time, comes to a close, now this is his new role. And so certainly a name that's familiar to everybody. And so there we go.
Is it an optics issue? Like, the reason why I asked that is I've already seen comments on our stories and on others that this is patronage at its finest. Like Savage was a Liberal MP, and then a good soldier, so to speak, and rewarded with the lieutenant governorship. Do you think that this has a bit of a tarnish to it? We'll say.
Oh, God. Okay, so here's the part where you say, wow, I'm never going to get her to be on the show again. I'm not going to say anything about it. I tiptoed around your first question.
Sure.
But this is one of those things in life where my wonderful partner is the person in Ottawa who actually does the work of making these appointments happen for the Prime Minister.
Okay, fair.
And so this is me saying nothing else.
Fair enough.
Sorry.
No, that's fair, and I'm glad that you transparency is a good thing. Moving on, the reason why we chatted on Friday and we decided to do this on Tuesday was that the HRM election is right around the corner. It's on Saturday. And there's been some indication in polling data that's done and from listening to candidates that there's a high level of disengagement here. Laurie, is that something that we're seeing in municipal elections across the country? Are people just turned off that much?
Yeah, it's not unusual. It's not unusual to see a lower level of engagement in municipal elections for a few reasons. They tend to get less attention overall because it's not like the federal scene where the media are all tracking the popularity of or lack thereof of the political leaders, and it's not that kind of media attention. So I think sometimes that tends to not have people have municipal elections as primed in their minds as much, right? Like this, of all the orders of government, when there's election, sometimes municipalities just get kind of the lowest level of attention. The other thing is there's no political parties involved, at least not in Nova Scotia. Some there's a little bit, but not in our province. And so there tends to be a little bit less, we see less advertising, we see less, political messaging coming from parties that we recognize because they're just not engaged at that level. And so sometimes it can mean people are just kind of turned off of it. They're not really thinking about it. And I mean, honestly, this isn't new. It's not unusual to see turnout in municipal elections around 30%.
Why? I mean, we always hear the stories, right? The municipal government is the closest to the electorate. I mean, they live in your neighborhood. They're talking potholes and not policy and those kind of things. And that should be the most engaged electorate, right?
I mean, you'd think so, like in some ways, because it's the thing, like that order of government is probably the one that has the most effect on us in the run of the day, like in terms of the kinds of services, like, things that affect you all day, every day. Municipal government plays a huge role. And now, as policy issues are becoming really complex, like something like housing, it's all orders of government, right? Like it's something that the feds have to get involved in, but it's ultimately a local issue. And so even when we think about something that the feds are talking about a lot, there's like the housing crisis, there is still a municipal component. And so, yeah, like why not more engagement? But I think there's like overall, the sense of apathy and turning off politics is increasing. And we do see it, over and over again at the municipal level, even though there's lots of people running, the voter engagement is not very high.
Lori, do you think that, and we've had this conversation on the open hour a number of times, do you think because there's, and I'm putting quotations around this, there are no parties in municipal politics, that is part of the reason why we see so many people turned off? Is it because there's no red machine or blue machine or orange machine attached to it?
Oh, yeah. And it's harder to figure out what the candidates stand for because there's no shortcut which parties provide. Like we can assume that if somebody's running for the Liberals or the Conservatives, you don't have to do a whole bunch of digging about that person. Like you can make some assumptions about what they're running on, right? Like what is their platform? But if someone's running municipally, it's as an individual. And the issues are what they are, and you have to go digging to find out how the candidates are different from one another. Sometimes to have a lot of candidates in the race is actually not necessarily a good thing for people getting engaged in it because it's like, oh God, there's like 15 or 16 of them. And so now I've got to go learn about all of them. This all could mean that those on the ballot that have name recognition will be at an advantage because there's a long list of ballots or a long list of candidates on a ballot. And are people just kind of going to scroll through and look for a name that they know if they vote at all?
That was my next question. How powerful is the power of incumbency?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, in this, like incumbency, like we can see the fact that for a long time, when Mike Savage was reoffering, there was, it was almost like a foregone conclusion. You didn't see a whole lot of people engaging as candidates. But now, since there is truly no incumbent there, you see more candidates get on the ballot. But there are obviously a few candidates who have held political office before and therefore are known to people. They have a record. They can, voters have a sense of what they stand for already and what issues are important to them. And so there could be an advantage there. On the other hand, that stuff can bring baggage too, right? Like people can have a sense, all right, we've tried that person before, let's try somebody else.
Lori, just before I let you go, I got an email very quickly on the back and forth between the federal government and the Indian government. Do you think that this polls well for the Prime Minister? Do you think him standing up and being this, and I'm going to put aggressive in there as a word, will help him in the polls? Will it hurt him, or does it matter?
If there's any effect at all, it'll probably be very short term. Yeah. Sometimes these sorts of things have an effect of making somebody look prime ministerial. He'll look in charge. Then it'll kind of maybe for a moment distract from other things that are bringing him down. But honestly speaking, if there's a blip, it'll be a blip and it'll be over.
Lori, appreciate your time.
You too. Take care.
Have a great one. That is Lori Turnbull, Dalhousie University political science professor. It's interesting, and we'll have to watch it because I don't recall, and I stand to be corrected, but I don't recall the Canadian government taking this rash a step. Now, that all being said, the allegations leveled against the Indian ambassador to Canada, and some of the other people in that circle are pretty severe. It doesn't get any more severe than murder, right? So we'll keep an eye on this, and we'll see where we go from here. We need to stop down and take a break. Blake will update us on what's going on in the news. And when we come back, new data from the Ecology Action Center showing that people living along the coast want protection. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ostrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. Dan Ostrand along with you here on a Tuesday morning as we continue to roll through the first day of the shortened work week, which are always busier, aren't they? Came across an interesting news release last week before heading off into the break, and I know it is of attention these days because the Coastal Protection Act is still top of mind for many people, particularly those living along the coast, and with all of the hurricane stuff that's happening or happened in the southern United States, I think it raises awareness about how vulnerable our coastlines are. If you've seen some of the pictures of some of the destruction that happened because of those two storms, it certainly makes you think what can happen here. Very pleased to welcome to the program to tell us a little bit more about this data and the Coastal Protection Act is the Coastal Adaptation Coordinator with the Ecology Action Center, Nicholas Winkler. Nicholas, how are you?
Good morning, Dan. I'm great. Thanks for having us.
I appreciate you joining us today. You guys, by you guys, have done some polling on this Protection Act, the act that has been passed through the legislature but was never proclaimed. And your numbers are kind of different from what we're hearing from government.
I guess they are. We did some polling around people's intentions or, if you will, sort of perceptions of the Coastal Protection Act. And we find that, 5 years on from when the act was proclaimed, that support for Coastal Protection Act for the Coastal Protection Act is quite high.
Tell me a little bit about what people are telling you about this and why they think it's a good idea, contrary to what we're hearing from some of the less than scientific methods the government used on their end.
Sure. Well, I think it would probably come to no surprise that coastal protection in general is of high importance to Nova Scotians as a coastal province. That makes sense. So something like 86% of Nova Scotians either see coastal protection as extremely or somewhat important. So that's top of mind. And if you live in a coastal community, that's probably easy to relate to. And then we were interested in finding out, are optional guidelines maybe a way that people are thinking about coastal protection, or would they like to see the Coastal Protection Act implemented? And really, 2/3 of Nova Scotians would like to see the Coastal Protection Act implemented. And I think those are some pretty strong numbers for the CPA.
The provincial government says that the municipalities that have a coastline can do a better job of this. Why does this act need to be at a provincial level?
Well, I think, first of all, we need a pan-provincial approach, one that encompasses the whole coast. We share the coast. We hear from people on the ground, if you talk to different municipalities, that not all municipalities will be able to afford or have the resources to do coastal protection. Some may not want to do it. So you might end up as a coastal resident, find yourself in a municipality that may have coastal protection in the future, or you might find yourself in one that doesn't. And that's why having a pan-provincial approach to coastal protection is really critical. And Nova Scotia has tried this over the decades again and again. And once again, we seem to be, not able to do it. And I'm not quite sure what happens, why we fall at the last moment. But the CPA has been, proclaimed was passed with all party support in 2019. And yet here we are 5 years later and nothing has happened.
The interesting nugget of data that I kind of dug out of this study was that 4 to 10 or like 42% of the people that you polled said that they would support a political candidate that wants the Coastal Protection Act enacted. That should be enough to raise some political eyebrows, you'd think.
Yeah, and the opposite of that is that very very few people would see a political candidate running on the Coastal Protection Act as a negative. So there's sort of no real downside if you're looking to run for elected office to vote to be in favor of the Coastal Protection Act. And I think it reflects a little bit what people are thinking around coastal protection and, that it is something necessary. I think you mentioned hurricanes earlier on at the start of the show, and we're in the middle of hurricane season. Look at what's happening in Florida. That's on top of everyone's mind this time of year.
Nicholas Winkler is the Coastal Adaptation Coordinator with the Ecology Action Center and is our guest this morning. That's kind of what the crux of this act is right? Is to be smart with the way that we build on coastlines to protect them and to protect us.
Indeed, and the act was adaptable to different parts of the coast and different needs and different circumstances. And I think anybody that's spending time on the coast of Nova Scotia will see all around Nova Scotia that people are building, in some cases within just a couple of meters, from the shoreline, or infilling into the water to build effectively what would have been water prior to that. And so it's a question of public safety, of making sure that when people build on the coast, they're not putting themselves and ultimately their property at risk. And I think what's also really interesting is that the CBC just did a report this morning on the retreat of the road, the coastal road at Lawrencetown, right? So this is obviously a reality that we're all realizing that we can't ignore. That's
a great example, because when we have storms, that's one of the places, after the waves go down, of course, that I go to see some of the damage, because those great big boulders that are in the water end up over and on the other side of the road.
Yeah, and that should give people who are building seawalls, which, by the way, the Coastal Protection Action Plan that the government has put forward does not really address. They recommend not building them, but it doesn't provide any enforcement as to whether, to ban them. And if you are putting boulders in front of a property along the coast, you should look at what's happening along roadways and how ineffective they are over the long term to protect property.
Nicholas, I've been told many times by callers and emailers to the show that the Coastal Protection Act is anti-development. Is it anti-development?
I wouldn't see it that way. I think it's about smart development. It's about building in the right places. Some people are also worried about the cost of what a CPA might do, but effectively people are already spending the money on reinforcing coastlines to great costs and to great risk. So I don't think it's necessarily about anti-development. It's about making smart choices. And we have regulations around development in places other than the coast that make sure we have good fire safety rules or solid engineering, that sort of thing. And I think it kind of falls in line with that. It's not anti-development. It's about making sure we build smart.
Is it about money? And the reason why I say that is the numbers from this report say that 86% of Nova Scotians think that coastal protection is important. 2/3 think the government should implement the CPA, yet we don't have one.
That might be a question for someone else, I think. I can't make any, I don't have any insight as to what the decisions were when the government decided to walk away from the CPA, but clearly people want it in Nova Scotia.
Nicholas, if we don't put a Coastal Protection Act into place, what will our coastline look like?
I think we're going to see more of what we see today, building in inappropriate places along the coast. We'll see a fragmentation of vital coastal habitat. We'll see more people and property put at risk, and by default, people's taxpayers' money for repairing and rescuing people. We'll see more first responders put at risk during storms, and we'll see more uncontrolled development of the coast in a way that we might come to regret in the future.
With this being passed and not proclaimed, it's literally the stroke of a pen, right? One stroke of a new lieutenant governor's pen, and suddenly that act becomes law.
That's right. I mean, the government would have to develop the regulations to go with the act, which is part of the way this is set up. But it's a fairly simple thing to do. It's really the willpower of the government to do this.
Nicholas, I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Dan. Have a great day.
Nicholas Winkler from the Ecology Action Center. It's something that, and I, when the Premier was in here, I asked him about it, and what I don't understand, and maybe I stand to be educated. I'm not going to say I know everything in the world, but when it's the will of the House to pass a piece of legislation, regardless of what bench or what color party or whatever it comes from, This isn't the first time that we've seen, and I'm not just blaming the Houston government. This has happened on other governments' watches as well. When we have a piece of legislation that has gone through the proper channels and has been voted on, I think it got unanimous consent, then it stalls at then I'm putting quotations around the royal assent level. It just feels like we're not doing the work of the people, doesn't it? It's the people's house, right? And the people that sit in those chairs represent you and me and everybody else in Nova Scotia, and they pass the bill. And I get it that some people are impacted by it, but if these numbers are correct, 86% of the respondents to this narrative research poll think it's important. 86%. There isn't too many things that 86% of Nova Scotians will agree on. Just listen to the open hour. 2/3, 68% of Nova Scotians think the government should implement the act. And even the government's own conservative voters, nearly half, 48%, that's people that checkmark blue, want to see the CPA implemented. I'll just leave that with you. Need to stop down and take a break. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Hope you're having a fantastic day as we roll on into this Thanksgiving shortened work week, as you get ready to chow down on your Thanksgiving dinner leftovers for lunch. We're very glad that you're spending a few minutes with us here on the program. A couple of minutes before the top of the hour, a couple of emails over some of the things I discussed off the top of the program today. One of them was dealing with the provincial government workers going back to work. Some suggesting that this is a good idea to have government workers mandated back to the office for 5 days a week, saying that it's more efficient. Others, and I'm not going to prejudge it, but I think that this person may work in the provincial government, saying that's not the case at all. That workers have proven over the last 4 years, that they have been more efficient from working from home. Something that maybe we want to talk about when we open up the telephone lines after the news at 11 o'clock today is the work from home model. Is its time over? Now, obviously the work from home model, for the most part, was born during the very beginning of the pandemic. You remember back a few years ago when we had to, because everything was shut down and locked down, and we had to work from home. We had to do it here at the radio station. I can remember having a talk show host hosting the afternoon show from his house down by Bridgewater. We had to do it. Was it easy? No, but we did it, right? Well, now the restrictions are gone, and people are back to normal-ish. And there are still some that like the hybrid model. Now, I'm at a disadvantage because, and Vanessa is as well, I didn't have much of an opportunity. I don't know if opportunity is the right word, but I worked from the studio for most of the pandemic. In fact, all of the pandemic, right? So I never had a work from home model. So maybe I'm not making the most educated of comparisons here, but I think that I can understand why the work from home model would have been a good idea, but maybe it's because I'm a people person and I just absolutely despise Zoom meetings. I do. Yeah, okay, you can see, yeah, whatever, okay, yeah, but it's not the same as human interaction, right? It's just not. And I understand the argument that, well, I get more distracted at work if somebody comes up to my desk, tap me on the shoulder and says, hey, what'd you have for dinner on Thanksgiving Day? But they do that in the Zoom meetings anyway, right? Is the work from home model dead? I can tell you that people that have businesses downtown that survive off of people working in office spaces will be happy to hear that. The restaurants, the coffee shops, the bars, the service industry will certainly be happy to hear that. The union, not so much. The employer seems to be happy with it. In fact, they mandated it. Anyway, after 11 o'clock today, we'll throw open the telephone lines to get your thoughts on it. I think that the work from home model, unless it's an extreme case, like if you've got some kind of communicable disease, like if you've got a cough or you think it could be COVID or RSV or whatever it is that's floating around, then by all means. But as a rule of thumb to work Tuesday to Thursday through the office and then work from home Monday and Friday or whatever your model was, I just think that time is done. But maybe you disagree with me. Also in the news today, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, and we will open up the telephone lines after the news at 11. As I mentioned, I was in my kitchen on Sunday, and I was, I think I might have been chopping up some turnip for turnip casserole, and my phone went off, and I looked, and lo and behold, there's a press release from the Prime Minister's office. And I'm like, wow, that's weird on a Sunday of a long weekend when people are at Thanksgiving dinner. And it reads like this. The Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, today announced the appointment of Mike Savage as the new Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia. Mike Savage is a respected former parliamentarian, mayor, and business leader with a lifelong commitment to serving the people of Nova Scotia. He's a member of Parliament for Dartmouth-Cole Harbour for 7 years, the mayor of the HRM for 12. Throughout his career, he's been a champion for social inclusion with disability rights, economic growth, affordability, and climate change action and mitigation. The Prime Minister thanks the outgoing Lieutenant Governor, the Honourable Arthur J. LeBlanc, for his service to the people of Nova Scotia and to Canada. The Prime Minister quoted as saying, I congratulate Mike Savage on his appointment as the new Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia. He is a passionate public servant and an experienced leader, and I'm confident he will continue to serve Nova Scotians well and make important contributions to the new role. That from the Prime Minister. And as you can imagine, I was kind of taken aback when I read that. Not that, and I said it off the top of the program, and I want to be very upfront. I think that Mike Savage will make a fantastic lieutenant governor. But did this kind of catch you a bit off for a couple of reasons? One, the timing. A release that comes out from the Prime Minister's office on a Sunday when we're all not paying attention. Is that suspect? Now, there might be a very good reason for that, for what I'm not privy to, but there might be a reason why they had to do that on that day. And two, he's not even out of the mayor's office yet. Like, he's technically still the mayor of Halifax. If you like the decision or not, is the optics of this just look bad? And I'm not sure what the process is on how we select lieutenant governors. I get it; it's a ceremonial position, but there's a lot of perks that come with the job, right? There's the lieutenant governor, there's the garden parties, and there's a salary, and there's that big house, and all of that stuff. And again, and I want to be very upfront saying that I think that Mike Savage will make a good lieutenant governor, but the optics of this just look awful. And I wonder if this will tarnish the soon-to-be honorable Mike Savage's term as the lieutenant governor. Stuff to think about as we stop down here for another break. The open hour continues on the other side of the news. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Allstrand. We're back in minutes.
Asked the girl what she wanted to be. She said, baby, can't you see? I want to be famous, a star of the screen. But you can do something in between. Maybe you can drive my car.
Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Allstrand. Hope you're having a fantastic day and you're getting back to the routines after that Thanksgiving long weekend. The telephone lines are now open, 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. It is the open hour. You can chat about whatever it is you'd like to talk about. But the two questions that I've kind of posed to you is, one, the 4-day or 3-day work week. That appears to be over now for provincial government workers. They are now mandated back to 5 days a week. Is the work-at-home model dead? And two, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the appointment of outgoing Halifax Mayor, Mike Savage as the Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia. 902-405-6000. We begin this morning with Bill. Bill, how are you?
Not too bad, sir. Not too bad. Well, first of all, Mike Savage, I think, is going to do a good job. He's done a pretty reasonable job. I mean, from what I understand, there's a lot of stuff he can't do that's really restricted. He can just do certain things in his mayor job, and it's pretty well the council. So I wish him well, and I think he's going to do a great job. And he's done a great job right along. So I haven't had much issue with him. So that's him.
Okay.
Now the 4-day work week or 3-day work week. There's a couple of areas that we got to look at here. First of all, if you have all these people at home, you still got your buildings downtown. You got to pay rent. The government, the taxpayers, going to have to come up with the rent money to keep these buildings. Without people, you can't have it both ways. I mean, if you want to have people at home and you want to pay a bunch of rent money out for these big buildings, that's not a good idea. So now there's a way of perhaps getting this solved. Instead of, if you want to work like 4 days, so say for sake of argument, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you're working somewhere, whatever, but let's say Friday, you get Friday off, but the idea would be to put in as much hours as you'd normally do with a 5-day work week. So in other words, work an extra hour till 6 o'clock or come in earlier, so that you're still getting 4 days in, and you're still getting the same amount of hours. What do you think of that one?
Well, I don't think anybody's going to be happy working a 10-hour, being forced to work a 10-hour week to have that extra. Well, maybe they will, Bill. I don't know, but I think
9 hours. Let's
or whatever
9
it is.
Hours.
Yeah.
And you're off on Friday, so you're getting you're still only working 4 days, but you're working more hours. That's all.
I get that part, but how does that apply for the service industry? Do you have to hire more people to cover that Friday into the weekend? And I agree with your point about the overhead. That never made sense to me. That we have all this space where people are working from home that we're paying lights and power and heat and all that stuff on.
Well, the thing with it is that, it's also hurting the restaurant people downtown that they would be benefiting from people. And also, I mean, how much do we know what they're doing at home? I don't think all these jobs is pretty simple, but I think a lot of these jobs at home, I mean, you don't know what they're doing. A lot of it, I'll bet you.
Well,
are they doing the job that they're supposed to?
Well, if they have benchmarks, Bill, or if they have, these KPIs, as everybody calls them, these key performance indicators, and if they're doing the work and the work's getting done, then, does it really matter if they're in their jammies or doing that kind of thing, right? But I understand. I understand where you're coming from.
That part's good. It's just one of the biggest factors I'm looking at is. Downtown, we got to pay rent for these big buildings they normally would be in. That's the biggest area.
For sure.
Other than that, sir, it's the best I can say this morning.
All right, Bill, have a good one.
Good man. Thanks.
Take care. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. We welcome Gloria to the show. Gloria, how are you?
How was your ham?
Oh, it was terrific. It had I glazing on it. I had the cloves stuck in it. It was great.
Oh, isn't that great? I'm calling this morning, Dan, to tell you that back in February, when I predicted that Savage was waiting for his appointment.
You said Senate,
I called Todd one day when Trudeau was in town and said, Todd, did you see the love-in between Trudeau and Savage? He did everything but kiss him. And Todd said, how do you know he didn't kiss him? I don't know, but I know he whispered in his ear, where's my appointment?
I thought you said he was going to get appointed to the Senate, though, Gloria.
No, I said an appointment.
Okay, fair.
Senate would have been the perfect one because you're there till you're 75.
Right.
Now he's got 5 years, and maybe by the time those 5 years are up, he'll turn Tory. and see if there's something he can get from the Tory government.
Wow.
I know politicians so well, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
There are two kinds, those that are there for the people and those that are there for themselves. And when they're talking about, like Bill said, all the wonderful things, don't forget that Savage was one of the people who voted to put 400 families out of their affordable homes up in Ocean Breeze. Don't forget that when they're talking about all the accolades about him.
Gloria, as always, appreciated the voice of the people.
Well, there you have it. And as I said, I forecasted it because I know politicians well enough to know what they're all about. So we can go back down in the big house now, and we will feed and house and pay them for 5 years.
So I don't suspect you're going to get yourself on the guest list for his first Lieutenant Governor's tea.
The will be a big Liberal garden party. Every Liberal in town will be there, or out of town.
Gloria, appreciate your time.
Okay, thanks.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. The open hour continues after the break. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. Dan Ahlstrand here. This is the open hour. The telephone number is 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. A number of open lines if you want to get in and get it off your chest. A couple of questions out there. One, is the work from home model done? The reason why I ask is that today is the day that the provincial government has mandated its workers back to a 5-day-a-week work week in the office. Is this work from home model that was born during the pandemic, is its time past? 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000 is the number. Also, the appointment of outgoing Halifax Mayor, HRM Mayor Mike Savage as the Lieutenant Governor. I'd like your thoughts on that. Again, 902-405-6000. We begin with Gary. Gary, how are you?
Not too bad, Dan. I disagree with Bill's assessment of Mayor Savage being a great mayor, and I agree with Gloria McCluskey there. She's hit the nail on the head with this mayor right from day one, Dan. Or previous to that, he had his election campaign going, and I think if I'm not mistaken, he raised something close to $300,000 for his campaign back then, his war chest. There was $120,000 left over after that was done. But during that time, he told his campaign managers, and it was reported in the Chronicle Herald,
mm-hmm.
he needed $10,000 a month for his lifestyle. Now, anybody that needs that kind of money, or back then, 12 years ago, what would it be today? He shouldn't have been mayor. He's out of touch. He was way out of touch then, and he's way out of touch the whole time he was mayor. It was him and his council that has caused the things that we're experiencing with infrastructure negatively, like it has been, along with the federal government doing the same thing. Bring in people. I'm not against immigration by any stretch, Dan, but we never had any kind of infrastructure plans for when they do come in.
Gary, how's that the mayor's fault?
Well, he said he stated himself, we need more people to come into the city, and he was advocating for that. And
Gary, I lost you. Are you still there? Your phone dropped out, Gary. Gary, are you there?
yeah, sure.
Okay, I lost you there for a second. Can you repeat what you just said?
Yeah, he and these councilors all agreed that we needed more people to come into the city. It was going to keep taxes down. It was going to create more economic conditions so that people can make more money, and it was going to be good to raise to keep the taxes down. But the infrastructure and everything, that was always going to be looked after through more money that was going to come into the city. None of that ever happened, Dan, and it got worse. And above all, the policies about bicycle lanes and that sort of thing for being a big city. We have narrow streets, and what's causing that is their policies. This whole council should be gone, and people don't listen to the issues. And like I said, right off the bat, and the other thing that he did, he wanted the stadium. The second day that he was in as mayor, he went and talked to Ambrosi of the CFL to come and bring it, and without even going to council about it or even discussing it with anybody. He was a one-man show there for the first part of his tenure.
Gary, I don't know why the mayor shouldn't have conversations about. He's not going to. He's a weak mayor. He has one vote at council, does he not?
Well, he does, Dan. But the thing is, he went on his own and did that. He should have taken it before council, and he didn't. That's my whole problem with this thing. And with Andy Fillmore coming in, he wants a more powerful mayor. And I hate to think what would happen if that happens. It was no surprise that he was going to be lieutenant governor. Or
surprised me.
Appointment.
It surprised me. I didn't think he'd be lieutenant governor.
Well, the thing is, I didn't know what it was going to be, and I agreed 100% with Gloria that there's friends in high places, and he got rewarded, and like I said, he's detached from the ordinary plight of people, wanting $10,000 right off the bat. That set it off me. I never voted for him once, and I don't know why anybody is so enamored with Andy Fillmore with these national policies, and that's going to spill over. The same thing is going to spill over into the municipal policies. It just shouldn't. People got to wake up. All they hear is Andy Fillmore's name on the radio because he's got a big war chest. He's got a bigger one than any of the rest of them. I can assure you that. So, and what people recognize is whoever's name is spoken the most, without even vetting them or even looking at their background. They, between the two of them, they were responsible for what's going on with our immigration policies and the policies for this city. And
I'll disagree. I'll disagree with the immigration that the two of them were responsible. Gary, you can't say that Mike Savage and Andy Fillmore are responsible for the immigration problem we're having. How is that possible?
Well, because they were the ones that advocated for it, and they didn't. And Andy Fillmore didn't vote against it when he was in as an MP. He agreed with everything that Trudeau did, so that he could get. He's got a tidy little pension from the feds now, and along with that, he's going to have that mayoral post. I hope not, but I don't want to see Wayne Mason there either. And that brings me to Jim Hoskins. Vote for Jim Hoskins if you want a true and honest mayor.
Gary, appreciate your time. I want to get to other callers. Have a good one. 902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. There's a lot to unpackage there from what Gary had to say, but I don't think you can blame the mayor of Halifax and a Halifax MP for the immigration problem that we're having. I think that is a little bit of a broad reach. Did Andy Fillmore vote for it? Sure, he did in Ottawa. But is he wholly responsible for it? I don't know. I think that's a bit of a stretch. John, welcome to the show.
Good day. How you doing, Dan?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
Well, I guess we'll start with this 3-4 day work week. I work for a international company, and when COVID hit, they did for the office people, they did allow a lot of them to work from home because, let's face it, no one could see what they were doing at work anyway.
Right.
You know, and I think what really bothers me about this whole short work week, the only people that is really going to benefit, or the majority of the people that's going to benefit, are your civil servants. So if that is the case, that short work week should be reflected in their compensation. Because the rest of us do have to put in a full week, or a lot of people a whole lot more than a full week. We are not compensated for that nearly as much as our civil services. So that's it for that. And you've had many programs, and Todd has many programs, and you asked the question, why are people disengaged with politics?
Right.
What happened on Sunday is just an example of why people are so disengaged. You know, Mayor Savage, appointment. My opinion on these types of appointments, governor generals, a lot of the Senate, if these people, because you always hear when they're appointed what they did for their country, all the contributions they made, if they're so interested in their country, and this is for all politicians at all levels, if it's their country and Canadians that they're standing up for, then why do you have to have all these packages, compensation? I've got to make this 100, 200,000, 300,000, and then after I'm finished, I get a pension that's absolutely ridiculous, no touch with the rest of us in Canada, and that includes everything but medical. So if these people are so gung-ho about helping Canadians and the people are their main reason they do things, I'd say start living like the rest of us, and we'll see how your tune changes. It's just, I don't know. It's disgusting. That's all I can say. I think that's about it. I put enough negativity out there.
All right, John, I appreciate the call. Thanks, man. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. We're going to stop down and take a break here, but before we do that, just a sort of reminder that we've got a lot of phone lines that are open. If you want to get on, this is a good opportunity to get into the conversation. Two topics today. One, the shortened work week, and that's probably not a good way to describe that, because we're not really talking about a shortened work week. What we're talking about is the work from home model. I'm not going to suggest that people that have been working from home for the last 4 years are only working 3 days and then they're just watching soap operas and on their couch at home during those other 2 days. I would never suggest that. I would suggest that, over the last 5 years, that the work from home model and those KPIs, those key performance indicators, and those job tasks and all of that stuff were being done. But my question to you is that model going the way of the dodo bird? Are we now past work from home, and are we back to the office 5 days a week for some of the things that Bill talked about? The rents and heat and space and those kind of things, or maybe is the work from home model something that we need to pursue even further for all of the benefits that are associated with it? Is the work from home model dead? My question to you. And the appointment of current, soon-to-be former HRM Mayor Mike Savage as a Lieutenant Governor. Your thoughts on that? You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. The Open Hour continues after the break. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. Dan Alstrand here. This is the Open Hour. The telephone number 902-405-6000. Before we get to the phone lines, and email during the break from Tom saying, Hey, Dan, so you're saying neither Savage nor Fillmore were wholly responsible for the current immigration situation. Therefore, it's unfair to criticize their support for the current immigration situation. Not what I'm saying at all, Tom. I'm saying that it's not their sole responsibility for it, right? There's a lot of blame to go around on that. And it's an interesting conversation with the mayor and Steve Murphy, and a conversation, I believe it was with Andy Fillmore, or it may have been somebody else that was running for council, that not only is the immigration problem responsible for what we're seeing here, but, and I'm talking about immigration from outside of Canada, but inter-provincial migration is also contributing to it. That we saw a big influx of people move here from Alberta and BC and Ontario during the pandemic because we live in such a great place. And that also contributing to it. Just to put that out there. Anyway, Tom, I appreciate the email. Barry, you've been on hold for a long time, sir. What's on your mind?
Dan, the work from home situation.
Yep.
I think one thing that's always left out of the argument or the discussion is the environmental effect.
Okay.
And of course, we all know global warming is on us. When you get up in the middle of January and get in your car and sit in traffic for a half an hour and go up on the 8th floor of an office building to sit in front of a computer all day, when you could do that from home, you're heating an empty office building all night and an empty house all day. And I think there's a lot of potential that we could do much better than what we're doing now.
So, Barry, you're going to, and I won't disagree with you. You're right. Obviously, the more that you travel, the more, emissions you're going to make. But those office spaces are going to be heated, and your house is going to be heated anyway, right?
Well, that's my point. You're heating an empty office building all night. It's
I get it. The overhead. I understand that. I understand that argument, but I see it from both sides too. I see it from the employer's point of view too. Right? Have to have an office space because you have people working some days at the office, so you got to heat it anyway.
Well, I mean, what's the point of having office buildings heated when they're not being used for most of the time, weekends, and
right?
If you have people working one day a week.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I don't even see why you'd have to work at a job site or an office building at any time during the week. If you want to have a meeting, well, you either Zoom or have a meeting in one building. But having all these buildings empty all night and heating them, as you know, the heat itself or the source of heat has an environmental effect, especially when we're still burning coal. But,
those are fair points, Barry.
Thank you.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000. I just cringe at Zoom meetings. And any of you that have had them, as many as I have, then there's a psychological effect that happens with these things too. I'm a big proponent of human interaction, right? I get it. You're working at your desk and Vanessa comes wandering over and she always brings these really nice, or she used to bring nice baked things to work and plunks it down on my desk. And, we talk about the weekend and we talk about her turkey and, and does the efficiency drop? Yeah. Okay. But that interaction is important, right? And I'll tell you that on the Zoom meeting, those interactions happen anyway, right? If they don't happen on the camera, they're certainly happening in the chat. So I get Barry's point. One or the other, hybrid model, does it work? Anyway, back to the question. Is the work at home, from home model dead? Let's welcome Ryan to the program. Ryan, how are you?
Good. How you doing today, Dan?
Good. What's on your mind?
So let's talk about this work from home thing.
Sure.
A few different points.
Yep.
First, one of your previous callers pointed it out exactly. When you have a company that has a certain amount of workers that work in an office and a certain amount that have to go out on the road and make deliveries or do whatever contract work they're doing, you end up with an unfair imbalance where you have some employees who are now working from home in the comfort and saving themselves the money from the commute and everything else, when you have another group of employees that have no choice but to go to work, and they have to go and commute. And what we saw over COVID was that a lot of these office workers get pretty large raises, and the people that don't work in the office did not get those same raises. So one of the problems is that you're increasing the sort of the gap between people that work in an office and people that don't within the same company. Now, you might not be willing to say that some of these people are just, would you say, watching the soap operas and stuff after they're doing their work. But anecdotally, since the beginning of COVID, I've seen a lot more people jogging in the middle of the day, or at the park with their kids in the middle of the day, or sitting in a coffee shop talking on their cell phones like not a care in the world. There's a lot more people, adults, working adults, that I see wandering about sort of aimlessly throughout the middle of the day when everyone else is at work. Now, I'm not saying that these people are working from home and sort of skipping out on their work, but I will say that there's obviously instances where people can sort of skirt whatever systems they have in terms of monitoring by their employers. And you see it, I've heard of it happening in Canada, but it's far more common in the United States, where people that are working from home full time, they're working for 2 or 3 different companies and holding 2 or 3 different full-time jobs that they're all somehow managing to do at the same time, sitting at their computer. Now, if you're working 3 full-time jobs, there's a good chance you're probably not doing any of them very well. And yet, just be able to sort of manipulate the metrics, you can make it seem to your employer as if you're working very hard. And that's just the working from home. I mean, and I know we're not talking about the 4-day work week, but that's a whole separate can of worms with its own issues that we're seeing across Europe already.
Ryan, appreciate the call.
Have a good day.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. 3 jobs at once. That means 3 times the Zoom meetings. I would go batty. Absolutely batty. And don't want to put words into Ryan's mouth, but it seems that he's a proponent of, having to occupy a space so that your manager can keep an eye on you for those, to make sure that they're getting their 7 or their 8 hours out of you every day. And I will say that there are some that require that, but I will also say that there are some that work better when they're not necessarily under the thumb of the person that's watching them, right? Let's go back to the phones and welcome Donna to the program. Donna, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And thank you for taking my call. I'll be quick.
Sure.
I agree with everything the previous caller said, and I think that all workers that are paid by taxpayers, provincial, municipal, federal, should all be back to work 5 days a week. Teachers are back, nurses are back, store clerks, grocery clerks, blah, 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 blah. They're all working. They're full shifts at work, and they don't get paid. A lot of them don't get paid and have the good benefits that the government workers do. And do you ever try and get a hold of a government worker on the phone? You're on hold for a long time, and then when you do get someone, you can hear dogs barking, kids crying, and the whole 9 yards. I personally do not like it, and I think everyone, and I have worked in the past for provincial government and the federal and private, and a lot of the government workers working from home do not work their 7 or 8 hours a day. I know that for a fact because I know several that do, and they're at their cottage, they're swimming during the day. So how can you do your job during the day if you're here, there, and everywhere else? Not on vacation. And I would bet money that the majority of the government workers or the people working from home do not do their 7 or 8 hours. Anyway, and that's my comments, but I fully think that they should be back full time.
Donna, appreciate that call.
Thank you.
902-405-6000. 902-405-6000 is the number. It feels, and again, I don't want to put words into people's mouths, but it feels like we're judging the work of people based on being at a desk for X amount of hours a day. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's how many people are paid. But if you have a stack of work that you have to complete every day, I'm just being the devil's advocate here. if you have a stack of work that needs to be done every day, if you're in the office and you burn through that stack of work that needs to be done during the day, and you still have 2 hours left on your shift, and you sit and you TikTok or you check your Facebook, I know I'm old, or your Instagram, is that effective? Or if you are able to get that work done, your assigned work, and I get it's different when you're taking calls from people, but if you're able to get through that assigned work through the day from home faster, does that work? I don't know. Just being the devil's advocate. Let's go back to the phone lines here and welcome Gary. Gary, how are you?
Hey, how you doing, Dan?
Good. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm not one of your frequent flyer callers.
Oh, I appreciate the call, man.
Yeah, no. It's an interesting show.
Thank you.
But I have a question for you as I'm sitting here. I know a number of times you said that Savage would make a real good lieutenant governor.
Lieutenant governor, yeah.
Why?
Well, I just think that he is, in the past, has been a champion for HRM. Right, he has represented the city on the local, on the provincial, on the national stage quite well. He was the chairman of the big city mayors conference. He's got the chops to do it. I think that in that figurehead position, he'll be a great lieutenant governor. My concern is the optics of that appointment being made while he's still in the mayor's chair.
Well, you said one word which was pretty important. I agree with figurehead, and I guess you got to look at what his job duties are. Is basically pushing a pen and a paper around, and
it's kind of what the mayor does, though, right? Isn't that what the mayor's job is?
Well, could you do that, Dan? Could you do that job?
The mayor's job? Oh, no, because on the lieutenant series,
could you?
Can I be the lieutenant governor of Nova Scotia? Probably. Yeah. I can host tea parties.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I guess I find it a little ironic because earlier you had the person on there from the food bank and the dire needs, and then I guess I've got to be in my bonnet because this whole lieutenant governor and whole governor general and everything else is just a colossal waste of money in my mind. But
so you're not a fan of they're not a fan of the monarchy, I take it.
Well, I don't mind them themselves. I just don't like the system. I think it's kind of a little bit ridiculous that, you've got people over here that, anyways, I don't want to get into it. But, the bottom line is that, he'll be, and I'm not begrudging him at all, but he'll be getting over $300,000 annually from his pensions and everything else. It would go a long way if all of a sudden he said, you know what, I'm getting over $100,000 for this position now. I'm going to take 10% and give it to Metro Food Bank, Parker Street Food Bank. One of those. Anyways, that's just my thought.
Gary, appreciate the call.
Okay.
902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. I don't think there's anybody that would turn down the lieutenant governor's job. No, I'm not bucking for it, but it's an important position. I get it that it's purely ceremonial, but you have to, regardless if you like Mike Savage or not, you have to admit that he has represented the city well on the provincial and the national stage. And that's kind of what the lieutenant governor does on a different level, right? I get it. There's a branch of government and it's the representative of the Crown in Canada and he has a legal job to do with legislation, but at the end of the day, the lieutenant governor position is a ceremonial position, right? 902-405-6000. Let's welcome Patrick to the show. Patrick, how are you?
Todd, how are you today?
Stan. But anyway, how are you?
Did you ever see the lieutenant governor's home there?
I've been in it.
Oh, lots of rooms, eh?
It's a large house.
And a big piece of property out front and back.
Yep.
And they have security. So, Gloria, if you're listening, maybe the displaced people from Ocean Breeze could move right in there with Savage. You could have tea every morning for them. that protect him because he has security, and wouldn't that be a humane thing to do for our mayor?
Patrick, I appreciate the call. I got to take a break. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. We're back in minutes. Only a couple of minutes left, so we're going to try to get to as many calls as we can before we run out of time. Let's welcome Ryan to the program. Ryan, how are you?
Hello, how are you?
Good. What's on your mind?
Good. I'm going to try not to get too steamed about this topic, but
Sure.
it's close to home, talking about government workers going back into the office.
Okay.
Today, I received a carbon rebate check to offset the cost of gas. Isn't that great? Too bad, unfortunately, I've been forced back to the office, which just spends more money on gas, which means I have one more car on that road, driving and clogging up traffic as we try to get through the rotary. You know what I do? I go into my office and I telework with other people who are in different provinces. I can do that same job at home. Instead, the government has decided that I need to sit in an office downtown in hopes to support the government, in hopes to support downtown businesses. But unfortunately, due to the economy sucking, I can't afford to go out and eat or have a beer after work. I have to get back in my car and spend an hour commuting back home to spend my rebate check. The other issue is that you have these individuals calling in who are all under this impression that government employees, while working from home, aren't working. I can assure you, if someone who is about to go to work now at 1 o'clock, I have to work till 9, I'll be working 1 till 9. Today I get to work from home, which means I don't have to spend 2.5 hours in traffic. Therefore, I get to spend 2.5 hours with my family and doing things. Also, as a government employee, most government employees work the same, 7.5 hours a day. You technically work at 8, but you're given a half-hour lunch and 2 15-minute breaks. And during that time, I'm allowed to go for a walk or go enjoy the outdoors with my family because that's my time. You have these individuals calling in. It's like, well, I see people walking around at the park and doing stuff. It's like, yeah, because I have an extra 2.5 hours of my life back that I get to do things. So we're sitting here and we're talking and complaining about global warming and traffic and how terrible the world is. But you know who the enemy is? The government employee who gets to work from home. They're clearly the bad guy, not the large oil corporations or the government manager who accidentally signed an extra 5-year lease on a big, giant, empty call center, which nobody works in. Another thing is a lot of times it's left out. Those mandating back to work, it's not all government employees. Most of that is management. To the division of government I work in, the employees don't have to come back. The employees never have to come back. That was put into their agreement because it saves everybody money. The government also spent millions, and I mean millions of dollars, on preparing the government employees to work from home, forcing them back into the office to do the same job I could do at my own desk by telecommuting with people in Toronto or Ottawa is just throwing that money out the window.
Ryan, let me ask you a question real quick. I want to get to some more callers, but let me ask you this question. Are you more efficient at work or at the office?
At home. Much more efficient at home.
Why?
I have a nicer computer because I have a nicer office set up. I set up over COVID, so I set myself up with the proper equipment. We're in the office. It's bare bones. Over COVID, our offices all got picked to death. There's no monitors, there's no keyboards, there's no mice. There's nothing there anymore. It's just empty cubicles.
Appreciate the call, sir.
Plus, one more thing.
Yeah, quick.
Also, working from home, I'm much happier as a citizen of Canada.
Fair.
Compared to sitting at 2.5 hours in traffic. All right, thank you.
No, I appreciate the perspective, Ryan. Thank you. 902-405-6000. Last word today goes to Michael. Michael, how are you?
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure. It's on your mind.
I live in District 15, approximately 23,000 people, pretty big area. And about 2 weeks ago, the challenger of the incumbent had showed up at my door, gave me about 15 minutes of his time. We had a long chat, and he walked away, and it was perfect. The incumbent of District 15, literally an hour ago, dropped off flyers in people's mailboxes. I watched him do it. A little disappointing. He's not a bad fella, but you think you take the time to engage. I was home. There's no reason why he wouldn't knock on the door, but we'll just drop it in the mailbox. I think the pallet shelters up on Metropolitan have him rattled. Plus, there's also rumor that he's going to be running, and there may be a by-election in a year and a half. Who knows? That being said, I'm looking at my tax bill on my fridge. It's due at the end of the month, the half interim one. What about the people in Ecom, Seacom, Hubbard's, Tangier? What do they get? You know, you really have to stop and think. So I had a long chat with one of the mayoral candidates, Jimmy Hoskins. Came from the boots on the ground as a police officer, 30 years plus. Jim went and canvassed these areas to talk to these actual people to see what he could do for them. Because for years, I mean, I couldn't imagine what Hensby has to go through, David Hensby, who will be voted in again, because he has a huge area down there. And those people, they don't even have sidewalks. And it's scary. But anyways, I was a little disappointed in the incumbent in District 15 who didn't take the time. And his challenger gave me 15 minutes of his time. I can see it's time consuming, but for God, we've known a year that this is coming. So anyways, that's all I had to say. And I guarantee you someone like Mike McCluskey wouldn't do that. So I wish him the best of luck in District 5 as well, because I truly believe the council needs to be taken out and replaced. It should be every 4 years, but that's my opinion. Thanks for taking my call, and my best wishes to Todd.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate it, and I appreciate each and every one of you that took time out of your days to dial the numbers and join the show. It'd be pretty boring talk radio if you didn't do it. Need to stop down and take a break. When we come back, time for Science Files. Dr. Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University will be your guest. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. Back after the news.
Dr. Robert, you're a new and better man. He helps you to understand. He does everything he can. Dr. Robert.
Welcome back to the program. It's time for Science Files. The lines are open. The telephone number, as always, is 902-405-6000. I'm Dan Olstrand, and he is Dr. Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University, who is still giddy after last week's, I guess, gift? Can we call it a gift?
Oh, This Week in Space was just amazing.
So, like, somebody's going to have to go a long way to make your Christmas, right? Because,
Yeah,
you kind of already had it.
The aurora on Thursday night was unlike any aurora I've ever seen before. Like, and everyone's like, why are we so amazed? Because I've never, ever seen the aurora to the south of me, right? Even living in Alberta, we would still see it to the north. Sometimes we would see it over the city lights, and very often green, but a red aurora that was so high, you could see it overhead and you could see it to the south. That just blew my mind. And it's like social media turned into this fun.
Oh, no doubt, right?
These pictures of the aurora, because it was just incredible.
It's something that like I've seen, and I've already said on the air that I missed it because I am what I am. That being said,
I'll give you a pat on the back. It's okay, Dan.
I've seen it before, but like you and I were chatting before, I've seen it, but it was always that that neon-y green kind of, maybe with just a touch of that red in it. But this was like a sunset. It was crazy.
No, it was really remarkable. I mean, when I first went out and I could see it was all red, I'm like, okay, where's the green? There was tiny hints of green that my camera would pick up, but really it just was red and it stayed red. I mean, I was you're saying giddy, I was geeking out. I literally ran to my next door neighbor, right? And I hit a doorbell at 9:20 and she comes out and goes, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm like, Aurora! And so she's like, now? I'm like, yeah, now, in the back garden. And so we went out there. Sam was there as well. And we were just like, oh, this is incredible. Because I actually have a whole bunch of trees in my back garden. And normally I think if there's an aurora, I'm not going to be able to see it because the trees block the view to the north. But I was looking up and could see it. And I was like, oh, this is just, sorry, I sound like such a total geek right now. But anyway,
right?
It was just amazing.
It's not often that Rob gets this excited about something.
No, it was unbelievable.
So let's dig into that a little bit. And explain the science behind, like, we understand how our aurora works, but how come this one was so much brighter and different than what we normally would consider the greeny kind of neon.
Yeah. So we've had a reasonable amount of space weather activity over the past few weeks and so on. So there's probably pretty good evidence the atmosphere is a little bit puffed up more than it normally be. This is one of the things that makes predicting when a satellite's going to come down actually quite difficult, because the overall sort of like how much the atmosphere is puffed up, technical term there, is difficult to determine. So in this particular case, there's probably a fair amount of space weather that we've had in the past few weeks, so there would have been a little bit more energy higher up. And so when you have a major solar storm come through like this that is actually able to interact at very high levels in the atmosphere, you also change the particular states of the atoms involved. And so I was sort of talking about this. This was a very specific transition of the oxygen atom that only can really happen very high up. It's a very, what we call a slow transition. It takes about I think it's about like nearly 2 minutes for the atom to decay between these two particular states, and it produces red photons as a result of this decay. It's called a forbidden transition. Let's not get into that. It's all complex quantum physics and so on, and actually I'm not particularly a good expert on either. So that particular transition, you don't see too much. It only happens very high up where everything is fairly still and the atoms can be in this what we call metastable state for a very long period of time, comparatively speaking, because normally transitions happen like that and they're done. So having all of those things come together was what gave us this really absolutely spectacular piece of aurora.
So is this, and I know it's overused and it's a cliche now, but was this the perfect storm for us to see the Northern Lights here in Nova Scotia?
So this is one of the things people have been going like, oh, can we see another one?
Yeah.
and like we are coming into a peak of solar activity, right? So from a sheer probability perspective, you can sort of argue that yes, if there was ever going to be a time where we might see another event like this, then this is going to be around that time. But we've had a lot of major auroras that have been visible from Halifax in the past few months, which for me is mind-blowing because we've been through another solar maximum before when I was here, and I don't remember us seeing this many aurora. And like last Thursday was unprecedented, right? Really, really spectacular.
I think the last one that I saw here was just the faintest of faint greens.
Exactly. Like people, a few months ago, we had the one where people were taking pictures and they're like, I could barely see it, but you could see this one so clearly. It was just mind-blowing.
902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. Let's get to the telephone lines. We will welcome Tim to the program. Tim, how are you?
Hey, guys. Good. I just want to ask Dr. Rob's opinion on the carbon tax. What is the most effective way of reducing carbon? The way, like the carbon tax, the way we have it now, or a tax on industry carbon?
Oh.
Good luck, Rob. Go.
No, I've stayed out of this largely because I do think that putting a price on carbon does work in some scenarios. So I'm personally, you got to look at the reason for doing that. And the reason for doing that is to essentially get people to consider alternatives and to make those other alternatives more economically sound. Because if you stay invested in one particular technology because it's cheap, you will carry on using that technology when you know you need to wean yourselves off it. And so that's really the philosophy behind it. There's different ways you can do it. So I'm actually going to not commit myself to that because I really don't want to get into it. I've said in the past, and a lot of people in the environmental sphere will say this. There are some people who don't. But at the end of the day, you need a system, right? And having an argument over which system you use, whether it's carbon tax or cap and trade, whatever, at the end of the day, you need a system that promotes the adoption of new technologies, and just making old technologies more expensive is one of the ways you can do that.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405. I guess that kind of makes sense, right?
Yep.
If it's and I'll use my and you're gonna really like this one. My visits to London and using the transportation system that's there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always stay in a place in southern London, in Croydon, and for me to take a vehicle to drive to Westminster
would be insane.
Is a 50-minute drive, and I have to pay a tax to enter the exclusion zone. They have an exclusion zone in London where if you drive into it, you have to, it's an £11 or whatever fee. Or I can pay $7 and get on a train and be from point A to point B in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So the old technology, the car, now trains aren't new technology, but they're cleaner. At least they should be. These ones are diesels. Probably not. But that to me makes sense. That's kind of how that works.
Most of the trains around London are electrified anyway. So yes, I mean, the one thing to remember when we compare to major cities is major cities have had decades and decades and decades of investment in transport infrastructure. And that's the one challenge. I lived in London for 2 years. I never had a car. Didn't ever need a car. Right. And
or a want. Right.
I mean, my sister had a car. So if ever we had something where we had to get out and do something particular, then I'd speak with my sister and we would use her car. But at the end of the day, it's set up so well in terms of getting from place to place, and you're just used to traveling on public transport because it's what everyone does. And I say everyone, I mean everyone, right? Millionaires are on the subway, the tube with you. Subway, how long have I been in North America?
You're going to lose your citizenship, Rob.
So you're on the tube. It's like I used to work for, I don't want to say where I used to work. I used to work for somewhere that was very important, had a lot of very well-paid people working there, and all of us were on the tube together.
Yeah.
Right? And like you were like, oh, so if there's a terror attack here, there's a lot of very, very
well, and then all those things aside, but it just doesn't make fiscal sense to use the old technology, the car, as opposed to the new technology, and that's kind of where you were getting at with your answer to carbon tax.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, this is a vastly more efficient system from an energy perspective as well, right? Let's not forget about that. So while electric vehicles will help, right, electric vehicles are not the final solution, and a lot of people are making this point, right? So Musk's sort of viewpoint on robocabs kind of get there a little bit more, but they're still not as effective from an energy perspective as large mass transit, right? And we'll need mass transit. It's just weird to come to jurisdictions, particularly in North America, where it's like, oh, I don't want to get on the bus. And I'm like, when everyone gets on the bus, you don't think about it.
Yep.
Right? So
when you get in a car, people look at you funny.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
it's the complete opposite.
Well, most of the time in London, if you're people in the car, you're moving faster than they are.
Right.
You look at the poor people sitting in the car who are like stuck in a traffic jam. So, but every now and again I would take a cab, and cabs were expensive in London, but most of the time, you're taking public transport.
902-405-6000 is the telephone number. Science Files continues on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. We're back in minutes. Welcome back. This is Science Files, and holy smokes, there's lots of calls on the line, so let's get to as many as we can. Let's start with Tyler. Your question for Dr. Rob. Tyler?
How's it going today?
Good.
Great.
Excellent. Well, I just want you to know that you weren't the only crazy person running around telling people about the Aurora. I personally probably stopped about 10 to 15 people while I was driving around saying, look up, and every single one of them had no idea.
Wow.
Every single one of them had no idea, and they looked up and they were like, "Wow, what is going on?" And I was kind of in the city, right? It wasn't necessarily a dark spot, and you could just see it. It was like a funnel coming. Yeah, it was absolutely
amazing
vibrant. I've never seen it like that. So just know you're not the only crazy person running around.
There you go.
I have two questions for you. I have quite a bit to say actually, but I'll get it down to two questions. There's a lot going on in space and space travel right now and exploration. A lot of things I'd love to touch on, but I'll narrow it down to two. One, what is your opinion on the NASA solar sail project that they currently have going around? And if you can kind of explain that a little bit. And actually, I'll ask my other question after you're done with that.
Okay, sure. So a solar sail idea is that you can literally use the energy from the sun to propel a spacecraft forward. Now, the main thing is they're very efficient, but as long as you want to go in a particular direction, right? Because you're relying upon the direction that the sun is pushing you in. And so you deploy the sail and you're literally capturing sunlight. It has to be, if you want to get high speed, it has to be a very big sail. But at the end of the way, it's an entirely sensible idea if you want to go out towards the sort of like outer parts of the solar system. And so it makes sense, right? This is well understood. All of the sort of particular physics of it has been worked out for many years.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily solar energy per se, as we understand it, where it's converted to electricity. It's literally like solar wind.
Yep, exactly. Yep, it's momentum. Yep.
And would that be? I mean, obviously, right now they're using it on tiny probes. It's like like a 1 gram chip, basically being pushed by a 60 or a 60-foot sail. What would be the plausibility of using that for, say, something like attached to like an International Space Station?
Massive.
So anything that you want that's going to have significant tonnage, right? You can do the math. Like you've got a 60-foot sail for a 1 gram thing. You've got to scale that up by well over 1 million to get to a ton. So you're going to have things that are, and admittedly, you're going to have the square because you've got the square of the area. So, but you're going to have to scale up by a very significant amount to do that because it's all basically momentum. So it's mass times velocity. So then you've got to just increase the size of the sail by over 1 million times. So you're going to have something that's, I don't know, kilometers square is what's usually talked about for sizable space probes.
Gotcha. And one more question and,
Sure.
and one statement. I think everybody listening should, definitely start getting into looking up and looking at space. I mean, just go on YouTube and look at a time lapse of the night sky and watch the elliptical orbit of our 23-degree tilted Earth roaming around the moon and the sun, and you can see Venus and Mars and everything going around. But people should take an interest. My last question is, can you explain what the NASA Europa mission is that they've just launched?
So the key thing to remember about Europa is it's one of the icy moons, right? And so at the end of the day, what you want to do to see whether you can find sort of evidence for life and so on is to send a probe up there that can actually sort of sample in the area around there. So Europa Clipper, isn't it? I think so. So that's going to be something that goes up. We're going to be flying around Europa itself, imaging. I can't remember whether it's going to be sampling directly or not. But at the end of the day, the point of it is to go and look at what's a potential, and I say potential, host of life, right? So the idea with these icy moons is that you have the sort of like soft. No, it's very hard. You have like 1 kilometer or more, sometimes as much as 10 kilometers of ice. And then underneath that, you have a liquid water ocean underneath that surface. And then you have a central core that's keeping everything liquid. And so that will be an unstable system. So every now and again, you will have sort of like geysers of water thrust up. And then could we actually have organic materials thrust up? That's one of those things. So there's going to be repeatedly doing flybys around Jupiter. And I should say that Jupiter is a fairly high radiation zone. That's one of the reasons why I'm not particularly one of the people who thinks that there will be life in these oceans, but it's definitely worth looking. And so that's what Europa Clipper is going to do. There's another mission called JUICE, which is being flown by the European Space Agency. And so that's going to be following up on these icy moons as well.
Well, thank you so much for your time and the information, and keep enjoying the coolest intro music that they have on the station.
Thanks, Tyler. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Okay, now, my understanding, and I'm not an astrophysicist, is that once motion starts in space, it goes on forever, right?
Yep,
so
yep.
if you had a great big mammoth solar cell and it got you moving, then would it not just maintain its speed based on gravity? So the idea is to get it
but
to that speed.
you use the energy of the sun to get you going, right? It's not a very rapid acceleration, but it's good enough to use. And then if you need to slow down, then you use your chemical rocket to slow down.
I was going to say, how do you stop it?
Yep.
You put the sail backwards and hope? Or?
Well, I mean, you can obviously fold the sail up, right? So that will help, but you're still going to have the velocity that you've created from having the sail up in the first place.
Sound like you can drop anchor.
That would be funny if we could. I mean, that would be great. If someone came up with a way of dropping anchor on a sail.
I have this like Blackbeard pirate ship in my mind right now, and let's just stop. Just drop the anchor.
Dolly Roger. So no, I mean, it is basically considered to be so it's a useful thing if you want to send probes and they're just going to fly by. It's sensible for that. It's also sensible if you can imagine you have stuff that you want to get out there and you're prepared to pay the energy cost of slowing it down at the end of it. But it's not like sailing a boat. Like with a sail on a boat, you can tack and so on. It's not like that. It's a bit different.
902-405-6000 is the number. We're going to stop down and take a break. But first, Rob, you've got a fan club here with this Aurora. This is from Mark. The Aurora was an amazing sight Thursday night. I saw streaks coming from a central point. Is that the Earth's magnetic field? That was a once-in-a-lifetime event for Nova Scotia, and I can't believe that it was right up overhead.
Yeah, no, I can't believe it was right up overhead. So in terms of the particular field geometry, so you've got two things going on. You've got the sun's magnetic field that's being transported via all of the solar storm particles and so on, and then you're going to have the Earth's magnetic field that's interacting with. And so there's literally going to be points within that construct that get sort of like twisted around and things like that. So my guess would be you're seeing a particular field twist, and when you look at them, they can kind of look like they're coming towards you in one way or another, but obviously there's a big projection effect on that geometry.
Haven't you talked about SpaceX yet?
I know!
And we need to take a break, and we're going to do that. See, it's like Christmas. Did you hear that? That's that opening the stocking joy. And we're going to continue Science Files on the other side of the news. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. Back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. This is Science Files. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. He is Dr. Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University. The science questions continue for the next half hour. 902-405-6000 is the telephone line. Before we hit those telephone lines, Rob, I said it was like Christmas for you, and it wasn't just the Aurora last week.
Yeah.
It was SpaceX and Elon Musk's vision of being able to catch a booster rocket came to reality.
Yeah, no, and so I always have to do this. Musk is not my favorite person in the world, but I will always give SpaceX. And to be fair to Musk, it's his vision to have landed these boosters. The fact they were able to do this first time up with the biggest rocket that humanity has ever built is, quite frankly, a remarkable feat of engineering. There's no really significant criticism you can make about the overall engineering achievement this represents, and watching them catch it. I mean, even it coming down sort of supersonic, you can see how fast this thing is. They then got to decelerate it with 13 rockets, right? And then you got to put it with the precision of a few feet. Mind blown. I'm doing the sort of like brain exploding. It doesn't work on the radio, but anyway, it was just incredible.
So maybe for those that haven't been following this, tell me the theory behind this and how it works. How does this booster rocket work?
So, I mean, people may well be aware that the Falcon 9 rocket has been landing, coming back to where it was launched from and landing for a number of years now. And initially, when this was proposed, most people in the industry said, that's crazy. You got to turn the rockets on again. We don't really design rockets to do that very much. You do maybe out of space, but most of the rockets are designed to be one and done. And so when he said, this is what we're going to do, sort of like 20 years ago, people said, no, you're nuts. You're not going to be able to do this. And they've been able to do it. And now to take that and build it on this huge, enormous booster is just not how people thought you would design rockets. Right? Something like this, most of the expectation based upon all of the Apollo engineering that we'd done and so on was you would launch it, you would lose the booster, it would come back down, burn up, land in the ocean somewhere. And that would be how it's done. Now you can land it, you haven't got any salt water in it, you can do your repairs, and then you can literally reuse it. There's a huge debate over how quickly you can reuse them. All right, fine, right? But nonetheless, you're creating a situation in which the materials that have been used to launch can be reused, and they're already doing it successfully with the Falcon 9, right? Really are bringing launch costs down by doing that. And then with this super heavy, I mean, wow, wouldn't have believed it. So I've been sort of saying, I don't know how they'll make this work. And didn't I get proved wrong on that?
So what's the cycle time from the time that we count down to zero and we say blast off to the time it lands back in the...
that's literally minutes. I mean, you've got a burn that goes on for about, 3 minutes or something like that with the booster. And then it comes back. And again, that's a few minutes again. So I think it was close to like 10 minutes or something like that to come back down again, right? So it's not very long, right? But remember, it's going fast. Right, so it's gone a long way, even if it's come back pretty quickly.
It's amazing.
It is. I mean, it really is. I'm really, truly speechless they've done it first time. I would never have believed that they would do it first time.
Is it a game changer? Does it change the way we do this?
So one of the big questions about going back to the moon is this issue that the so-called rocket equation is a really, really difficult thing to deal with. If you want to put a lot of mass a long way away, you need a lot of fuel to do that. And so SpaceX have said, okay, we know that's the case. So what we're going to do is we're going to run lots and lots of refueling flights, right, to actually refuel in orbit, and then our huge lunar lander will go off to the moon and it will have enough fuel, right? And people were saying, how many refuelings do you need to do? And they're a little bit vague, but it's between 8 and 12, right? And everyone's like, 8 and 12 launches of Super Heavy? That's crazy. Now you've seen over the weekend, if they can land it, repurpose it in even just a few days, it's not so crazy after all, right? Which is, again, pretty amazing engineering.
Can they just cool it off and
that's going to be the question. Certainly the case, as far as I know, with the regular Falcon 9 boosters, they do take a fair amount of time to rebuild them for flight, right? How quickly could they do it? I don't know the answer to that. You'd have to speak to the SpaceX engineers.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Let's welcome Rafe to the program. Rafe, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Your question for Dr. Rob, please.
Yeah. A couple of questions, actually.
Sure.
My first question was, I was watching the spacewalk there a couple of weeks ago, and I was just wondering, when a human is exposed to outer space without a suit, like let's say something happens, I was discussing this with a friend of mine. He said that you would burn up because of the radiation, and I always thought you would freeze because it's so cold. What would happen to a human body if it was exposed to space?
You're both right. So the thing to remember is if you're exposed to the direct sunlight, that's a lot of sunlight, right? And so that's going to burn things. But the back of you is going to freeze, right? Because that's completely in shadow, right? So,
gotcha.
So that's one of the real challenges with designing a spacesuit. Like you've got to deal with significant need to dissipate heat. And then on top of that, you've got to be able to keep the astronaut warm as well. So it's got to be able to cope with all those circumstances.
Okay. Yeah. And my second question was just completely unrelated. I was on a flight to Alberta last week, and the plane we were on had too much weight, so they had to unload some cargo.
Oh, wow.
But we were not on a weigh scale. Like we were just on the tarmac. So I'm just wondering, how do they weigh a plane if it's not on a scale? Did they have their own internal measuring, like weigh scales? To find out if they're overweight?
I would presume that you could put a sensor onto the wheels or the struts, but I honestly don't know off the top of my head how they do it. You can certainly keep track of obviously the weight that's going on because all of that has to be measured. And so one of the things that you'll be aware of is sometimes they come on and ask people to move around if you're on a flight and people are sort of sparse in the cabin. But I don't honestly know that off the top of my head, but I believe you could do something that would give you an estimate.
That's what I was thinking. They have weigh scales like in the suspension of the wheels or something of the suspension, and then they could just weigh it as they go. Yeah.
Maybe there's a pilot listening, Rafe, and they can answer the question for us.
I mean, I'm sure that they can calculate it as well. So if you had to, you could calculate it.
All right. I appreciate it. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Rob, I was always and again, I'm not the tallest tree in the forest, always under the impression that space is a vacuum, and if you weren't in a suit, would it not damage you as a human being? You'd be crushed, wouldn't you?
No. So you don't have very long if you're going from place to place without a spacesuit. I mean, it's literally a minute probably. And so the things that you've got to keep in mind is it's a vacuum, so there's no pressure. So don't gulp a lot of air in because that's literally going to explode not explode your lungs, but it's going to rupture your lungs. So you breathe out, right? People have studied this, right? Seriously, people have studied this. So you breathe out. You also put your hand over your mouth and nose. Close your eyes as well, because your eyes are going to be exposed to the vacuum space, which is not good for them, right? So yeah, it's you've got literally probably about a minute, and that's it. And you know, get hit by a solar storm, that's going to be the equivalent of like several thousand X-rays. So
SPF 30.
Yeah, not a good place to be. Not a good place.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. We welcome Eric to the program. Eric, how are you?
Good afternoon, Dan. How are you?
Good. Your question for the good doctor, please.
Yeah, Dr. Rob, you know, there's so much unexplained phenomena on Earth. We seem to be over-curious about what's happening in space. I don't know if you've heard of this or not, But I came across a story. It's called Miles Hole, and apparently a farmer in Washington State discovered a sinkhole or a crater on his property that was approximately 9 meters in circumference, and they could never get to the bottom. And they put thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of cable down, and then it became really weird. They put a goat in a cage, put the goat down. And I know this sounds like science fiction, but I guess
you're reading my mind.
Anyways, anyways, they put a goat down in a cage, and this is where it gets really weird. They brought the goat up after a period of time, and the goat was dead. But this is where it gets like science fiction. There was something moving within the goat's belly, and then they opened the goat up, and there was a creature that they hadn't seen before, and the creature. I know it sounds crazy, and the creature was not happy about where it was at. But here's what happened. The person named Miles, he had incurable cancer, and within 3 days after this, his cancer was cured.
Wow!
And apparently now, the United States government has this whole place cordoned off, and they have special forces there, and you're not allowed to go into it. So it's sort of, I was saying, it sounds kind of crazy.
Yes, seriously. I've just Googled Mel's Hole, and so this is an urban legend, a bottomless pit near Ellensburg in Washington. And so there's a lot of discussion about it. People went and did an investigation into about 2002. So
feels like a Netflix series I watched.
Well, possibly. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if a TV show had picked up on it and had done a program on it. That's more than possible. So, but there is some stuff out there. There's probably stuff on Snopes about it as well, I would guess. So, yeah.
Got to take a break. You're listening to Science Files. This is the Todd Veinotte Show. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the show. It's Science Files. He's Dr. Rob Thacker. The telephone number is 902-405-6000. Let's welcome Scott to the program. Scott, how are you? You have an answer to our weight question.
Well, thanks for taking my call. So, Dr. Rob, I'm pretty sure that when these aircraft are manufactured and delivered to the customer, they have a gross tonnage. I'm sure that they are told what the weight is. Probably wet, and that would mean oil in all the engines and stuff like that. And they know how much jet fuel is per pound. I think they go by the pound, and so I'm pretty sure that.
So they calculate it, is what you're saying.
So if every plane is the same plane, they know basically that it's this much. And then with passenger aircraft, they average an adult into a certain category, male or female. I don't know about the kids. Then they know how much baggage they could put on for their application.
So having bags that are too heavy would mess that up, right?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Scott, I appreciate the call.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how it would work.
Sure.
Okay, Scott, thanks. 902-405-6000. And those, I think the days of, in my limited travel, of the just the actual bags going inside the hull is gone. They've all of them got the containers, which would be very easy to weigh, right? So I'm assuming it's a calculation.
So here's the thing, right? So can you remember the Gimli glider thing?
Yep.
Didn't they get that wrong because they used the wrong units?
Yes.
Right. So there you go. They must have been calculating.
That's right. And they ran out of fuel and coasted.
Longest unpowered glide by a jet ever. Yeah.
Alexander, how are you?
I'm fine, Dan, and hi, Dr. Thacker.
Hi there.
Quick question for you. Dr. Thacker, I was doing some reading, which I blame you, too, on for making me do because of my interest in your show.
I will take that blame quite happily. Yep.
But I was reading about the Great Silence, or the Fermi question. And
the Fermi paradox.
Yeah, the Fermi paradox.
Yeah. Yep.
And then I was reading some other articles about how they were saying if there is aliens out there, they're keeping a low profile because it's in their interest to do so. And I just wanted to see, do you subscribe to either, or without going down the rabbit hole of UFOs and stuff? But do you just subscribe to one or the other?
Yeah. So just let me explain Fermi paradox is for anyone that might not know. So the Fermi paradox is The universe is nearly 14 billion years old. We've been able to have stars and planets that could generate life for at least 6 or 7 billion years. And given that long period of time, the question that's always asked is, why aren't we seeing evidence of other civilizations? Why haven't they sort of like shown up knocking on the door and things like that? And there's a number of potential reasons why that might not have happened. And one of them is simply that the galaxy is really big, right? I mean, that is a factor. And so there's a lot to explore. But the other idea that's become more talked about recently, I would say, and it's a little bit depressing in a way, is that if you are an intelligent civilization, you keep yourselves quiet because all of the other intelligent civilizations could be potentially dangerous. And so this is one of the sort of like fundamental ideas in the three-body problem series. And that's like the dark forest idea, that everyone stays quiet because if you don't, someone bigger is going to come along and take you out. I find that incredibly depressing. Like to build a civilization up to the state where it's capable of like we haven't admittedly solved our own problems. Like we haven't figured out what to do about climate change and messing up our own planet to make it really difficult to live on for us. But I find that whole sort of like dark forest argument for why we're not seeing other civilizations really a bit difficult to stomach, because I'm a humanist. I'm optimistic about the human condition and our ability to cope and deal with things and be supportive of others. And so I'm not someone who's going to subscribe to that as the reason why we don't see them. I personally think it's just the fact that even receiving something like a TV signal, the best radio telescopes we have that we're building right now, they're only going to be able to do that about 4 light years away. And it's a really, really big galaxy. Now, something like an airport radar, now that's something that we could detect quite a long way away. So if we turn on the next generation of radio telescopes and we really don't see anything, that's an interesting proposition. But I find the whole dark forest idea quite depressing, actually.
Okay, so great. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Alexander. 902-405-6000. Let's welcome Matthew to the show. Matthew, how are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Your question for Dr. Thacker, please.
Yes, of course. I've been meaning to call you for about a year. Somebody called in about a year ago, I remember, and you guys got into a conversation. And what you guys were talking about, it just set off a spark in my head. I thought, oh, that sounds like an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation regarding Dyson spheres.
Yeah.
And sure enough, you brought it up, and I realized then that you're a Trekkie. So I have Star Trek related question for you that I've always been curious about, because in Star Trek there's always a little bit of theory behind everything that they pitch in their shows.
Yeah, they put enough in to make things plausible.
Yeah, so in The Next Generation, they refer to the weather modification net. Do you know what that is?
The weather modification net. Well, I can guess it's a weather modification
it's
system?
Exactly what you think it is. Yes. Whenever a tornado or a hurricane would pop up, they can either direct it out to sea where it's not going to do any harm, or they can just eliminate it completely. And, of course, when we need rain, they can make rain with the modification net. And if we don't need it, they can affect that. So I was just wondering how, if we ever wanted to start in something that crazy, where would we start? And is it, do you think, actually plausible? And I'm just going to hang up and listen to your answer.
Thanks, Matthew.
So I can give you an answer that's less Trekkie and kind of more based in science. So what you can do, there are some aspects of weather modification that you can do, right? And so we've talked about cloud seeding. Basically, it's about getting water to precipitate. And so you need to sort of like shoot something up into the clouds, and then you form nucleus that water will precipitate around, and then you produce rain. But the water has to be there. You can't magically put the water there. That's the thing to remember. So what people have talked about is, as we're all actually more and more aware, because we see tracks, hurricane tracks across the ocean and these things building, that when you have hurricane systems, they start off fairly small. Right. So if early on you can actually sort of like get them to rain out a bit more and things like that using cloud seeding and so on. That is a possible way that people have looked at. Now, I don't know, or at least not in detail, how effective that actually was, but that's certainly something that people have discussed before. And that's not quite the same as being able to redirect tornadoes. I don't know how you would ever do that, or for that matter, hurricanes once they're formed. But there certainly are periods in weather systems when they can be influenced.
It's like we were talking about last week in the meteorite or the asteroid that is a long way off and just have to deflect it just a couple millimeters and it makes a difference, right? So the same thing would happen with a storm. But once they're formed, there's so much energy there. How would you ever move that?
So we had Trump saying, can't we nuke these things? No, you can't. I mean, there's so much more energy in these systems than a single nuke. I mean, you just can't, and it's so irresponsible just to start talking about nuclear. Although, if you go back to the 50s and 60s, people were talking about using nuclear weapons for building harbors and things like that. So, yeah, we've come a long way from that.
Space, the final frontier.
Mm-hmm.
Rob's voyages on the Starship Enterprise.
No, I was full on geek out this week. No question about it.
Well, we'll let you go and continue to bask in the glow of the auroras and the SpaceXs.
This has been the best week since we had the total solar eclipse.
There you go.
Yep.
You heard it from the source. Thanks, Dr. Rob. And thank you to you for taking time out of your day, dialing the numbers, and joining the show. You make my day each and every day that you do it. Thank you very much to all of our guests that joined us to incite their knowledge upon us. And don't forget, tomorrow is Wednesday. That means Dr. John Gillis will be on the show, and he will be here to answer your medical-related questions. So if you've got something that's nagging, tomorrow will be your opportunity with House Calls and Dr. John Gillis. Thank you very much to Vanessa Vandenez on the other side of the glass for keeping things moving forward as mankind. Anyway, she does a great job there keeping things moving, which is not an easy task. Just ask her. Have a fantastic day, everyone. Be good, and remember, be kind to one another.